name is Rachel, and this is my story. Well, I was born into a large family. I'm the youngest of 5 children, and both my parents were Christians. So I was brought up in a Christian family where we read the Bible, we prayed, and we learnt about God. My dad was a leader in a church, and so a large part of my childhood was really centred around that church. The church was quite a strict church. There were lots of rules to keep. There were lots of things that were off limits for us, and there were lots of meetings to attend. Most days of the week there would be some meeting or service to go to at church. Because I was brought up in a Christian family, and because I was heavily involved in church as a child, I never doubted the existence of God. I always believed in God, and I was always very much aware that God was there. But I had quite conflicted ideas about what God was like and about what Christianity was really about. On the one hand, I had been taught that God was a God of love and that he loved each one of us and wanted us to be friends with him. But on the other hand, the picture of God that I'd been given was one of a very stern God, a God who, rather than being a father, was more like a strict head teacher or a boss who was watching us, watching our every move and making sure that when we failed, that would be punished. And so I didn't quite know how I felt about Christianity. On the one hand, I could see that Jesus in the Bible was a loving God, and so that pulled me towards Christianity. But on the other side, I saw a strict God, and I saw my life restricted and certain things being off limits for me. And so I perhaps felt that God was a bit of a killjoy who wasn't really interested in my happiness and was just interested in keeping tabs on me like a head teacher. As I got a bit older, into my late childhood, into my early teens, I began to think a bit more seriously about who God was and who I was. I had been taught that we're all sinful, we all do things wrong and we all make mistakes, and that was something that I knew to be true from my own experience. I would wake up in the morning and try and be good for a day, and I couldn't manage it for even an hour, so I knew that to be true. And I was also taught that God hates sin. God is holy, God's perfect, and God doesn't like the wrong things that we do, and that seemed to make a lot of sense too, and I could see that in the Bible. So what I started to do was I started trying to be good and failing. As I got into my early teens, I started to pray more, and I started to ask God to forgive me for my sins, which we know is the right thing to do. The Bible teaches that we should ask God to forgive us our sins. The problem was that I was relying on myself to get myself right with God. I kept on trying to be good, trying to be a good person, and I kept on failing. It was only really in my early teens that I started to think a bit more and to read my Bible a bit more and to realise that the reason that God can be a God of love but also hate our sin is that he's given a way to deal with our sin. He sent his son Jesus to die on the cross, and Jesus lived that perfect life that we can't live, and Jesus died for our sin. It took me a few years though to really realise that actually I can't trust in myself, I can't try to be a good person, but I have to instead ask God to give me Jesus' perfect life instead, and I need to start trusting in what Jesus has done and not what I can do. And it was probably when I was about 14 or 15 that I started to realise this, and I finally had that sense of inner peace. I didn't anymore have that conflicting idea about a stern God but also a God of love. I realised that God is angry at sin, he's angry at the injustice in the world, he's angry with the wrong things in the world, and that includes the things that I do wrong. And yet he's also a God of love because he's given us a way by giving his only son that we can be right with him. And I finally realised that he invited me too into that relationship with him. And I finally had that peace, that sense of joy, and that sense of God as a true God of love. Before I became a Christian, my view of God and my view of myself was very different, and that has changed. I used to view God as this stern figure, a headmaster with a long list of rules, waiting for me to fail and wanting to spoil my fun. I viewed myself as a complete failure because I could never keep those rules, and I wanted to have fun. Since becoming a Christian, I've realised that God is a loving Father who's created this world for us to enjoy. When we make mistakes, he's there, ready to welcome us back if we turn away from what we've done. and He's the source of all joy and all goodness. Another thing that's changed is how I cope with difficult times and how I cope with suffering. Now my happiness doesn't depend on circumstances. Instead, I've got this amazing relationship with the living God. He's real and He's there, and I can call upon Him whenever I'm struggling and whenever I have hard times. He carries me through those difficulties and He gives me a sense of peace. Like most people, as I've grown into adulthood, I've had really hard times, and yet God has been with me the whole way through and carried me through those difficult times.